A faint hum vibrated through the rocky outcrop where Lieutenant Finn Calder lay, cloaked in shadow. The light of the fading sun glinted off his rifle scope, catching the glimmering line of alien energy shields stretched across the valley below. Finn adjusted his position, every movement deliberate, calculated. He was alone out here, tasked with an impossible job, stalling the Dravians, an elite alien battalion whose shield technology outclassed anything humanity had ever faced. Finn steadied his breathing, his gaze fixed on the enemy below. The Dravian soldiers, hulking figures encased in armor with eerie, cyan-blue eyes, moved with cold precision as they unloaded supplies, their shields shimmering in the twilight. Every now and then, one would glance his way, confident in their defenses, secure in the assumption that they were untouchable. Finn couldn't help but smirk. "Laugh it up," he muttered, eyes narrowing as he aligned his scope. He wasn't here by chance, he was here because he was the best marksman humanity had left. And the last human settlement depended on him holding his ground. His earpiece crackled to life, breaking the quiet. "Calder, do you copy?" The commander's voice came through, tinged with static and desperation. "Copy, sir," he replied, his tone low but steady. "Reinforcements are delayed, weather interference. ETA unknown. Hold your position and make every shot count." Finn's fingers tightened on the rifle. "Understood." He returned his focus to the alien force below. Even with his skill, piercing their shield wasn't guaranteed. Dravian tech was nearly flawless, no projectile should break through. But he'd studied their movements, watched their shield patterns. Every few seconds, a faint flicker ran through the energy barrier, almost imperceptible. Finn had spent hours studying it, timing it, waiting for that perfect moment to test his theory. He lined up his scope on a Dravian officer barking orders, its voice a guttural, grating sound that cut through the ambient noise. The officer pointed in his direction, barking something that made the soldiers glance his way again, almost amused. Finn could feel their mockery even from this distance. They were safe. They were untouchable. And they knew it. "All right, let's see about that," he whispered. He waited, holding his breath, counting the seconds in his head. The shield flickered. A fraction of a heartbeat. That was all he had. He fired. The recoil kicked against his shoulder as the shot rang out, slicing through the fading light and finding its mark. The officer stumbled, its armor cracked from the impact, a sliver of dark blue blood staining the ground. The Dravian soldiers froze, their confidence fracturing as they looked between their fallen commander and the distant ridge. The silence that followed was punctuated by the sharp, panicked clicks of Dravian voices. Their heads whipped toward him, scanning the landscape with a mix of shock and fury. One of them, larger than the others, raised its rifle and fired, the blast scorching the rocks inches from Finn's head. He ducked, rolling to a new position with practiced ease. "Guess I got their attention," he muttered, a thin smile ghosting across his lips. The Dravians recovered quickly, forming a tight line, their shield regenerating with an angry hum. Finn adjusted his scope, watching as they adapted, the shield's frequency increasing. He knew he wouldn't have much time before they came for him, but he couldn't back down now. His fingers grazed the rough metal of his last magazine, and he cursed under his breath. Limited ammunition, dwindling cover, and no backup. The odds were grim, but he'd learned long ago that retreat wasn't an option. His mind flicked back to his last conversation with an old comrade, his voice echoing. "It's not about who's stronger, Calder. It's who's willing to hold the line." He exhaled, settling into his new position. Below, the Dravians fanned out, covering each other as they advanced, their movements synchronized and relentless. He adjusted his aim, tracking them, calculating their weak spots, his mind a whir of tactics and probabilities. Each second brought them closer, and each heartbeat felt heavier than the last. His earpiece crackled again. "Calder, any update?" "Still here, sir," he said, his voice calm, steady. "Just hold on. We're working on getting to you." Finn didn't respond. Words wouldn't keep him alive, precision would. He honed his focus, feeling the ground beneath him, the coolness of the air, the weight of the rifle in his hands. He was here, he was ready, and he was humanity's last hope. Another flicker in the shield. Another shot. Another Dravian down. The Dravians hesitated, regrouping as they realized their shielded advantage was dwindling. He could see it in their movements. Their confidence wavered, their mockery replaced by something close to fear. "Let's see how long that shield holds," he muttered, settling in for the long night ahead. The Dravians readied their weapons, eyes fixed on the ridge, prepared to erase the lone human who dared challenge them. Finn's lips tightened into a grim line as he exhaled, fingers steady on the trigger. Finn's muscles tensed as he scanned the valley below. A ripple of motion swept through the Dravian ranks, their blue-hued armor glinting like water under moonlight. A shiver of unease wormed through him. They weren't just defending anymore, they were regrouping, focusing with an intensity that hinted they'd be coming for him soon. One of the Dravian soldiers began issuing orders in that guttural, resonant tongue that sounded like grinding metal. The troops shifted into a wedge formation, advancing up the rocky incline. Finn's grip tightened on his rifle, his heart thudding against his chest. This was no mere defensive stance. They were hunting him. "Calder, status update," came the commander's voice in his earpiece, the sound gritty with static. "They're closing in, sir." "They're done watching," Finn replied, keeping his tone measured. "They're hunting now." A slight pause crackled on the line before the commander responded, his voice laced with an urgency that hadn't been there before. "Do not engage unless necessary. Reinforcements are en route, but we're still pinned down by atmospheric interference." Finn swallowed, eyes darting back to the advancing alien line. He could almost feel the tremors of their heavy, synchronized steps reverberating up the slope. "No promises," he muttered, ending the transmission. They had closed a third of the distance already, far too close for comfort. Finn shifted his position, steadying his rifle as he aimed at the alien leader barking commands. His finger hovered on the trigger, his mind whirring with calculations. One precise shot could create confusion, slow their advance, maybe even turn them back if he played his cards right. He exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The shot sliced through the chilly evening air, colliding with the leader's helmet in a sharp clang. The alien staggered, a crack spidering across its visor, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a thunderous roar that echoed through the valley, rallying its troops to close the distance faster. "Damn!" Finn hissed under his breath, ducking as return fire peppered the rocks around him. The Dravians' weapons hissed and spat, blue energy bolts slicing through the darkness, each blast close enough to feel the heat singe his skin. Finn scrambled behind a jagged outcrop, pressing his back against the rough stone. His breaths came quick and shallow, adrenaline sharpening his senses. He could hear the crunch of boots on gravel, the faint hum of their energy shields drawing nearer. His rifle's magazine was down to 3 rounds, and he doubted that would be enough to hold them off. A memory flickered through his mind, his squad training in a desert, his former captain's voice gruff and direct. "Adaptation, Calder? That's the difference between living and dying." He glanced around, his gaze landing on a cluster of loose stones a few meters away. An idea sparked. Quickly, he scavenged for anything he could throw, his fingers closing around a sizable rock. As the footsteps approached, he hurled the rock to his left, letting it clatter noisily against another outcrop. Instantly, the Dravians fired toward the sound, their blasts crackling against stone and dust. Taking advantage of their momentary distraction, Finn rolled out from behind cover, his rifle lined up with another soldier's head. He fired, watching as the alien crumpled, its energy shield flickering before going dark. 1 down. Only a dozen to go. The remaining Dravians reoriented, splitting their attention between his location and the false sound to the side. Finn used the brief lull to retreat further up the slope, seeking higher ground. His legs burned, his pulse a relentless drumbeat in his ears, but he pressed on, every step widening the distance between him and his pursuers. Reaching a new vantage point, he dropped to one knee, adjusting his scope. The aliens were adapting again, advancing with shields raised in a layered formation, making it nearly impossible to land another clear shot. Frustration clawed at him, but he shoved it down, focusing instead on their weaknesses. There had to be a chink, a flaw he could exploit. Another memory surfaced, of a time when he'd been trapped in enemy territory, using only his wits and a broken calm to evade capture. His captain's voice had been clear in his mind then, too. The enemy's pride is often their downfall. He peered through his scope, catching a slight lag in the lead soldier's shield. It was minuscule, barely perceptible, but it was something. He fired. The shot slipped through the brief lapse in the energy field, striking true. The Dravian staggered, a guttural cry escaping it as it slumped to the ground. Panic rippled through the alien ranks as they scrambled to close their shields tighter, their formation faltering. Finn allowed himself a grim smile, his fingers flexing around the rifle stock. He'd bought himself a few precious seconds, maybe enough to survive until reinforcements arrived. But even as he relished the brief success, he could feel exhaustion creeping in, his breaths coming faster, each one heavier than the last. "Calder, hang on!" The commander's voice broke through his earpiece, more urgent now. "We're nearly through the interference. Reinforcements should be with you shortly." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Make it quick, sir. I don't know how much longer I can keep this dance going." He steadied himself, feeling the press of both desperation and determination. Below, the Dravians regrouped, their shield lines tightening, advancing with a ruthless, unwavering persistence. Finn raised his rifle, ready to make his last few shots count. Finn crouched behind a crumbling ridge, his pulse thudding in his ears as the Dravians advanced up the incline. His chest tightened as he watched their relentless march, their shimmering blue shields overlapping with eerie precision. They moved like a machine, each part integral, each step calculated. They were within shouting distance now, close enough for him to hear the steady hum of their energy barriers and the metallic clink of their weapons. He took a steadying breath, gripping his rifle with white-knuckled intensity. 3 rounds left. No more, no less. Finn's survival depended on every single shot counting. Through his scope, he focused on a soldier at the front of the formation. The Dravian's expression was masked by its helmet, but its posture radiated confidence, a confidence Finn knew would be his undoing if he hesitated. He waited for the shield's faint flicker, an almost imperceptible window in its cycle. When it appeared, he pulled the trigger, the shot slicing cleanly through the field and catching the Dravian square in the chest. The soldier stumbled, fell, its shield dissipating in a crackle of blue light. A ripple of uncertainty spread through the remaining Dravians, their advance faltering for a precious second. Finn allowed himself a tight, grim smile. They'd finally realized he was more than an inconvenience. "Calder!" came his commander's voice over the earpiece, laced with urgency. "Reinforcements are closing in, but you're going to have to hold a bit longer. We're navigating debris, and it's slowing us down." "Noted, sir," Finn responded, voice taut. "I'll keep the welcome party busy." But his confidence waned as he took stock of his situation. 2 rounds remained, and his cover was thinning with every volley of Dravian fire that chipped away at the rocks surrounding him. Dust clouded the air, stinging his eyes, and the sharp smell of scorched earth bit at his senses. A new Dravian stepped forward, this one marked by a crimson insignia on its shoulder, denoting a rank above the rest. It gave a curt command in its harsh, guttural language, and the formation tightened, the shields closing ranks in response. Finn's heart sank. Their defenses had adapted again, their shields rotating in a way that left no gaps, no weak points for him to exploit. He weighed his options, but they were dwindling fast. He couldn't take them all out with 2 bullets. He would have to make his shots count for something beyond just slowing them down. "Think, Calder," he muttered under his breath, forcing himself to focus. His training had drilled into him that there was always a way, even if it wasn't obvious. He scoured the landscape, eyes landing on a narrow overhang jutting out above the Dravians. An idea took root, rough and risky, but it was his only chance. Sliding the rifle onto his back, Finn scrambled up the incline, his fingers digging into loose rocks as he climbed. He reached the edge, his breath shallow as he looked down at the enemy below. They hadn't seen him yet, too intent on his last position. Perfect. Finn steadied himself and fired his second-to-last round at the overhang's base. The shot echoed through the valley, the bullet striking its target with a satisfying crack. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, with a rumbling groan, the overhang gave way, sending a cascade of boulders tumbling down the slope, directly into the Dravian ranks. Chaos erupted. The once precise formation shattered as Dravians scrambled to avoid the deadly avalanche of rock and dust. Their shields flickered wildly under the barrage, failing under the weight of the debris. Finn watched, a thrill of triumph sparking through his exhaustion. He'd bought himself a precious handful of seconds, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The Dravians regrouped, battered but far from broken. Their leader with the crimson insignia raised its weapon, barking orders with renewed fury. Finn saw them advancing again, slower but no less deadly. He tightened his grip on his last round, feeling the weight of it in his hand like a lifeline and a curse. "Sir?" He spoke into the earpiece, his voice level but strained. "They're still coming. I'm down to my last shot." The commander's voice was a mixture of steel and regret. "We're doing everything we can, Calder. Just hold." The finality in the command settled heavily over him. Finn's gaze drifted to the valley below, now strewn with rubble and the bodies of fallen Dravians. And in that moment he felt a strange calm. If he was going down, he would do it on his terms, taking as many of them with him as possible. He adjusted his rifle, eyes zeroing in on the crimson-marked leader. If he could take down their commander, he might just break their spirit, buy humanity the time they so desperately needed. Finn took a breath, steadying himself. The air around him was thick with the scent of scorched stone and alien blood, the faint crackle of their energy shields still humming below. He placed his finger on the trigger, every sense honed to this final act. Before he could fire, a distant rumble shook the ground, followed by the low whine of approaching engines. Finn's heart surged. Reinforcements. The cavalry had arrived. But the Dravians had heard it too. Their formation broke as they looked to the horizon, hesitating for the first time. Finn seized the moment, his last shot ringing out, cutting through the fading light and piercing the Dravian commander's chest. It dropped lifeless, the crimson insignia darkening in the dirt. The Dravians faltered, some retreating, others frozen in shock. Finn sank to his knees, a weary grin on his face as he watched humanity's reinforcements crest the ridge, engines roaring, weapons ready. Finn's vision blurred as he lowered his rifle, his limbs heavy with exhaustion. The rumble of humanity's reinforcements thundered through the valley, their ships skimming the ridge and casting long shadows over the alien force below. Relief flickered across his face, but he knew the fight wasn't over yet. The Dravians, despite the loss of their commander, regrouped swiftly, their disciplined ranks reforming like a tide refusing to retreat. One Dravian, marked by an insignia Finn hadn't seen before, a jagged crest gleaming darkly on its shoulder, stepped forward, rallying the shaken troops with a guttural cry. Finn gritted his teeth. This one wouldn't go down easily. He fumbled with his empty rifle, wishing he had just one more round, as the Dravians surged forward in a last, desperate push. The earpiece crackled to life, the voice of his commander steady, though edged with urgency. "Calder, backup is here. We're moving in to mop them up. Can you still move?" Finn took a deep breath, forcing his aching legs to cooperate as he pushed himself upright. "Barely, sir," he replied, his voice rough. "But I'm not out yet." "Good. Link up with Delta Team by the eastern ridge. They're en route to provide cover. Hold tight, Calder, we're not losing you now." His commander's words ignited a spark of determination in him. Finn began the staggered descent, his boots scraping against loose stones, each step calculated to keep him steady. Around him, the air buzzed with the hum of approaching human dropships and the roar of gunfire echoing from the valley below. He caught sight of Delta Team cresting the ridge, their armor glinting in the fading light as they laid down suppressing fire against the Dravian ranks. A familiar voice cut through the din as one of the team members spotted him. "Finn! Thought you'd be down there playing dead by now." It was Corporal Reyes, his grin audible even through the helmet's visor. "Good to see you, Reyes," Finn replied, his voice edged with dry humor. Can't let you have all the glory. They clasped hands briefly, a silent show of solidarity before turning to face the enemy. Delta Team spread out, advancing in sync as their weapons blazed against the Dravians, scattering the once intimidating alien formation. Finn felt the rush of adrenaline again, the weariness lifting just enough to keep him in the fight. The Dravian with the dark crest barked an order, and a line of alien soldiers armed with powerful energy rifles moved to counter Delta Team. Blue energy beams crisscrossed the field, heating the air with an intense hum that seemed to vibrate through Finn's bones. He dropped behind a boulder, gritting his teeth as shards of rock splintered off from the relentless energy blasts. A sharp pain seared through his left arm as a stray shot grazed him, but he clenched his jaw, ignoring the burn. Reyes caught his eye, concern flickering across his face. "Finn, you good?" Reyes called over the din. "Nothing I can't handle," Finn replied with a faint smirk, tightening a makeshift bandage around his arm. "Let's finish this." Reyes nodded, giving him a resolute thumbs up. Together, they launched from cover, moving as a single unit. Finn pulled a sidearm from Reyes' belt, feeling the weight of it like a lifeline. Though the pistol lacked the range of his rifle, it would serve its purpose at close range. As they advanced, Finn's attention zeroed in on the Dravian leader with the dark crest. It moved with brutal efficiency, taking down soldiers with calculated, unflinching strikes. The creature's sheer resolve was palpable, its cold, unyielding gaze never wavering even as the tide turned against it. Finn narrowed his eyes, adrenaline surging anew. This one was the linchpin, he could feel it. If they could take down the leader, the Dravian's last semblance of coordination would crumble. He signaled to Reyes, nodding toward the Dravian leader. Reyes understood instantly, his expression hardening. Together, they charged, weaving through enemy fire as they closed the gap. Finn fired, his shots precise, forcing the Dravian leader to break formation and engage them directly. It turned, fixing them with a chilling, metallic stare. Finn could feel its hatred, a cold, unyielding force that met his resolve head-on. The Dravian lunged, its movements a deadly blend of speed and power. Finn ducked under a sweeping blow, feeling the rush of air as the strike narrowly missed his head. Reyes circled behind, landing a shot that struck the Dravian's armor with a sharp crack, forcing it to stagger back. Seizing the moment, Finn drove forward, his sidearm pressed to the alien's chest. He fired point-blank, the recoil jolting through him as the energy discharged. The Dravian jerked, its armor splintering with a hiss as dark fluid seeped through the cracks. It stumbled, its gaze faltering, and for the first time, Finn saw a flicker of fear in its cold, blue eyes. The Dravian fell, its body crumpling to the ground, and with it, the alien line seemed to falter. The Dravians hesitated, the cohesion in their ranks disintegrating. Human forces surged forward, pressing the advantage, and Finn could feel the victory settling over them like dawn breaking through the darkness. Reyes clapped a hand on Finn's shoulder, his voice full of exhausted relief. "You did it, Finn!" "We did it!" Finn nodded, a weary smile tugging at his lips as he looked across the battlefield, the sight of scattered Dravians retreating into the shadowed horizon. Humanity had held its ground, bruised and battered but unbroken.